Hello everyone, welcome back to the One Code Camp channel. So whether you're looking to level up your coding skills or just starting out, today we're going to discuss about DOM manipulation and how it will help you breathe life into your web pages. So DOM manipulation is one of the ways of JavaScript being able to make our web pages dynamic. So let's say we want to change the behaviors of specific elements inside our HTML. Then one of the ways to do that is using DOM manipulation. But first, let's discuss what a DOM specifically is. So let's start with DOM manipulation. So what actually is the DOM? So the DOM is a web document programming interface. So in this case, it would depict the HTML or XML structure as a tree. So we're able to get specific branches in order to manipulate them and change the way they look or the way they behave. So elements in the markup are nodes in this tree. And using JavaScript, we can dynamically access and manipulate the page's structure, content, attributes, and styles through the DOM. And the DOM stands for the Document Object Model. So with that, we need to talk about the different types of nodes that we could have inside of a DOM. So this would include document node, and this would refer to the whole HTML document. And under that would be element nodes, and these would represent HTML elements such as divs, paragraphs, H1s, and etc. Next would be text nodes, and these nodes represent the actual text within an element. So within a paragraph tag, you would put text inside, maybe something like hello world. Attribute nodes represent attributes of an element. So these would be the IDs, classes, names, and etc. And comment nodes would represent comments within the actual HTML. So these would be comments for devs if they want to see the code, and things that you don't want seen inside the HTML document. So as an example, this is what it would look like if we were to put it in a specific diagram. So you would have at the topmost would be the document because it would refer to the whole thing. It's the root of this tree. And under that document, we're going to have specific elements like HTML and the body. And inside the HTML, we could have a head or maybe a div. And the head would have all the metadata of our website, or maybe some links to some external files like styles.css. Or we could have the body where it will have maybe specific element nodes or text nodes like hello world. And maybe another text node, they're that like this is some text. So we'll be able to apply that now with our code. So let's try to see this in action. So let's get started. But before we start coding and doing DOM manipulation, we first have to install Visual Studio Code. And this is going to be responsible for being our code editor. And this has some specific extensions that could help us streamline our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So once it's installed, let's go and open it. Go to File, Open Folder, and let's create a folder called DOM Manipulation and select that folder. And we'll be greeted by this screen. So before we get into DOM manipulation, let's make sure we have the live server extension. So if we make changes to our server, it'll make sure that all of our changes are there automatically. You won't have to manually mess with the code or the page in order to show our changes. All right. Once that's done, click out of that and let's start with our HTML. So let's just make it index.html. So once again, HTML is the structure of the page. So here's where you're going to put where everything will be, or what are the skeletal contents of your page. In this case, we could just make some boilerplate using HTML:5. This is an Emmet abbreviation. So it's just there to help you with boilerplate code and making your code a lot shorter. All right, so let's change the document title and make it DOM manipulation tutorial. In this case, we're going to have H1 say hello world. All right, let's see if this actually works. So let's right click, and if you have live server installed, you're going to see this open with live server. If you're a fan of shortcuts, you also have Alt-L and Alt-O. Well, in this case, we could just click on this and we could see our page right here. So if you make any changes, for example, let's add a p tag and let's make it, this is the paragraph tag. All right, and we're going to see a paragraph tag right there. I didn't even need to refresh. And for the last one, let's have a div. And we're going to populate that later. So next thing we're going to do is link a CSS file. Let's not worry about the CSS for now though. For DOM manipulation, the most important thing would be the HTML and the JS interacting with each other. So in order to do that, let's make a script tag and let's make the source script.js. All right. And once we all have this done, we can now move on to our rudimentary CSS. So the CSS isn't really going to have much since we're going to be playing with the basics of DOM manipulation. So let's just do some significant styling to everything, asterisk meaning everything. And let's just give it margin of 0, heading of 0, and a box sizing of border box. This is just to reset everything, so everything is not spaced by default, because that's what the browser does. And now that we're seeing the same thing, we can now move on to the JavaScript, which is going to be the meat and potatoes of our discussion today. So, in order to discuss DOM manipulation, we first need to discuss the types of getting the elements from the HTML. And there are actually 5 ways in order to do that. First one to discuss is get element by ID. So get element by ID is one of the first ways in order to get elements from the HTML. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You just have to input its ID in order to get the element. So you can actually do that by creating a variable. We start with let. And we could say h1, or maybe hello would be a better term. Hello would be equal to document. This would refer to our HTML document. In this case, it is index.html. And we could use a method called getElementById. And this accepts an argument. This would be the ID that we're actually getting. In this case, I don't actually have any IDs in the index yet. So let's try putting them right now. For the h1, we could give it an ID of hello world. All right. And let's do the same thing here. Put in hello world. And let's try logging what's actually in this variable. So in order to see console logs, we have to go to our browser and inspect or open your DevTools. And we're going to see that it actually links us to the specific element that has the ID of hello world. So let's say I change this ID to be on the tag. And now it shows us that we're linking to the paragraph. But this is fine if I put it back on the h1. That'll do. All right. Next way. What if we want to get an element by its class name? And we can actually do that. It will be called getElementsByClass name. So why elements? Because ID is element and this elements. Why is it suddenly plural? So the thing with IDs are that they should be unique. So this hello world ID will only represent one element inside the HTML. We'll actually get the warning if we do multiple IDs. If we actually do multiple of the same ID, it'll give us an error here in our DevTools. It would say ID must be unique. So an ID is basically a unique identifier to all of the elements inside the HTML. But we can also group things together using classes. So let's say I want to get a bunch of elements together. We could call it element list equal to document dot get elements by class name. And the thing with get elements by class name is we can get multiple, because multiple elements can have the same class. For example, you can have this. You could give it a class of element list. Same thing with this div. All right. Now it's currently giving us an error because we need to put something in this as an argument as well. So let's give it element list because that is what we made the class. All right. Now let's try logging what's inside this element list variable. All right. And now we have an HTML collection. So with an HTML collection, we can actually mess with its different attributes like its ID, class. If we give it the name, we can also change that. And we're actually going to see a different kind of collection later on. But for now, HTML collection. There you go. All right. And something in a very similar vein would be get elements by tag name. So compared to class name, we could actually get elements by specific tag. For example, we have h1, p, and div. These are the specific tags that we could identify with this get elements by tag name. For example, I want to get the h1s. So let's say h1 would be document dot get elements by tag name, and we're going to give it an argument of look for the h1s. So we could try logging what's in here, h1. And now it's giving us another HTML collection, and it only points to this hello world that we made. But we see get elements by tag name. We could actually get all of the h1s that are present in this HTML. So let's say I'm going to make multiple, and I'm going to remove these IDs because once again, IDs need to be unique. And now we have 3 h1s. So it would refer to the first, second, and third. All right. So these are 3 of the specific ways in order to get elements by their specific attributes, but we're actually missing 2 more. And these are called query selector and query selector all. So query selector functions just like get element by ID. It will get the first occurrence of whichever applies inside of its argument. For example, let's say I want to get the div. You could say document dot query selector, and it'll look for a div. And we could try console logging that, log div. And we could see this div over here. Now, what if we try and actually clone this element list? It will only show the first occurrence. So let's say I could say this is 1 and this is 2. It will only show 1. So for the others, it will not show because that is the job of query selector all. But query selector is actually a wild card because you could actually enter the ID and the class name as well if you want to get that. So let's say I want to replicate number 4, line number 4 over here, and just make it get elements with the ID of hello world. So we could actually start with a pound sign. This is the symbol for ID. And we could say hello world. And there you go. Much like get element by ID, it also got us the ID. It also got us the element with that ID. So in this case, we could also change it to be a class. So for it to be a class, we need to start with dot. And then let's try and replicate what's happening in line 8. Element list. And if you notice, get elements by class name gives us a list, but query selector only returns 1 as it only returns the first occurrence. All right. Now let's actually try doing query selector all. So let's say this is query list. And then we could log what's in here. Oh, of course, we have to change this to query selector. And now we can see a difference. HTML collection and node list. What are the differences here? The difference between the HTML collection and the node list is that we could call the HTML collection using its different attributes. Like let it be its ID, its index number, its name. But with the node list, we could only access it using its index number. Say, we could say the second one as JavaScript always starts with 0-based indexing. So it will call this class. All right. So this is the first part of DOM manipulation, being able to identify which elements we are going to manipulate. But how do we actually manipulate these elements? Now, one of the ways to do this is to actually access its inner HTML. In order to do that, we could just simply call something. For example, I'll get the hello. This would refer to the first hello world. And we could get its inner HTML. And we could actually log this and see what's currently inside this hello. And we could see that it's hello world. And let's see what will happen if we change what's inside. We could say goodbye. Now you can see that the first one is actually changed to be goodbye world, and we've successfully manipulated the first H1. So that's one of the ways to do some DOM manipulation. So we were able to get the specific elements, and we were able to update them to be a specific text that we wanted. So that wraps it up for today's video on DOM manipulation. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.